Liverpool last season, you got to say, were amazing, but at times, in some of the biggest games, at the biggest moments, there was a big problem stopping us from, well, I guess progressing, really. I look at the PSG game in Champions League final. I look at the final of the Carabao Cup against Newcastle. There was a massive problem in that game, Arne Slot said himself, which stopped us winning that game. Today, we're going to talk about what that one thing is and how Arne Slot needs to get it right this season. I have every faith he is going to get it right, by the way, because he's shown at times this season he can be proactive and change it and get it right. Leave a like if you enjoy and subscribe. What the hell not? It's free. Let's start. Liverpool's biggest problem, in my opinion, close brackets, dual success percentage, right? Okay. When Liverpool won the league in 2019-20, we had a 50.6% dual win rate. That is one of the best in the league. It was one of the best in the league at the time. Allowed us to win the league. It was not the only factor allowing us to win the league, of course, but it's such a significant part of the game. If you have a lower dual success rate, you lose the ball more times, you give them the ball more times, you give them more chances, they score more goals, you lose more games. It's simple as that, right? It's such a defining factor in not just a game, but a season. If you win your duels, they always say, don't they? If you win your 1v1 duel, you probably win the game. If everyone won their 1v1 duel, you win the game. Probably. I mean, you'd probably have to score some chances, but you'd have a better chance of winning. And I look at that 22-23 season, and this reflects it very well. We were the worst in the league at dual success. I mean, 47.5, worst in the league, and it reflects with our poor season. And whilst that's what, a 3.1% difference between the best and worst, it's still massive. It looks like a tiny number, but it is a huge sway in how you perform in the season. Again, it's not the only factor of us being bad that season. That's not the only reason we were crap that season, right? There's so many other reasons, but it's one of the big ones, guys. And I really think in them big games, I look at PSG, I look at Newcastle, that was the problem. It was the big problem. It's probably the only problem, actually, in that PSG game, certainly, one of them. This season under Arne Slot started strong at a 51.2, sorry, dual success percentage rate. But in January, it had fallen to 48%. We'll talk about why that's decreased. We'll look at Ryan Gravenberch here on the side, bit of a hint as to what we'll talk about. And this is a really good stat. And granted, it doesn't take into account the whole season. It's only relevant, I think, until 47 games into the year. Out of the 47 games, up until when this was written, Liverpool only won more than 50% of their duels in 15 games. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's a really poor stat for a team who've won the league. I think that's a poor stat. And I think if you replicate that next season, when Man City are firing, you'd like to think, when Arsenal, you'd like to think, are going to be firing again, you can't get away with that every game, in my opinion. And it was true in Newcastle, Carabao Cup final at Wembley. It was true against PSG. Just want to talk briefly, one slide about the Ipswich game from last season, the first game of the year, just to hammer home how important it is to win your duels and how Arne Slot's changed something in the game and it's forced us to win more duels and therefore win the game. This is a prime example of Arne Slot being proactive. In the first half of the first game under Arne Slot against Ipswich in August, Liverpool won just 41.5% of duels. How bad is that, by the way? So bad. This prompted Slot to make his halftime changes and later comment that Ipswich had one-on-one duels all over the pitch. Remember this? It was quite a big thing at the time because he yanked off Quansah at half-time, the young lad, after giving him his first start. It's like, wow, that's pretty bold to do that, but it worked. Liverpool won 2-0 that game, and we looked a lot more comfortable, right? The dual success jumped to 54.5% after the changes. That's a massive increase. What's that, 14.0% increase? And Liverpool went on to win the game 2-0, underlining Slot's emphasis on duels. We're going to talk about PSG and Newcastle in a second as case studies to hammer this home, but I want to just talk about that drop-off at January for dual win success rate. Liverpool averaged 51% dual wins up to New Year, but it dropped to 48% from January upwards. Again, whilst that's only a 3.2% drop-off, which may seem tiny, we saw at the start how that small margin is massive. It's massive. Like it could be the difference between winning a game and losing the game, just that 3%. And that was our average after January. Across all seasons, they've won just... I've shown you this. I've shown you that goddamn stat twice, but it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Only 3 times in their last 17 games did we have above a 50% dual success rate. Didn't show you that stat. Wow. I'm glad I did. Only 3 times in the last 17 games we had over half dual success rate. 3 times. If we're going to win the league, that's a very opposing stat to a team who've just won the league, right? And it was showing. Why was that? Why was there such a big drop-off after January? We'll talk about it in a minute, but I think mainly I've got a picture of Gravenberch on here for a reason. He played a lot of games, and he was the guy. Your DM tends to be the guy dictating the duel. Like, he should be the guy leading your duel metrics. Him and your number 8s, really. And he's played a lot of games. He's gone last season playing every game to the season before, playing hardly any of the games. I understand completely why that's dropped off. I mean, certainly his personal metrics will have dropped off. And I think we're playing a lot of games. Sorry, a lot of cup competitions. We're still in every cup by then. There's a lot of games going on after January, and that's probably why. That PSG game, guys, what happened? Now, just to get this out there straight away, Liverpool won this game 1-0, but that scoreline, if you think, well, what you talking about, won the game, we were awful. We all watched that game. I cannot believe we won that football game. We were battered from start to finish. Listen to this for a start. Liverpool managed only, hear me out here, 32.5% of duels won. We won 32% of duels, man. 27 out of 83. The lowest success rate in any, hear me out, any UCL game under Klopp and Slot. And I read ever. Like, not forget Klopp and Slot, I read ever. That's just not on Liverpool's. That's not Liverpool. That is not how you do it on a European night. Liverpool step up. We did not step up that night, and we got pissed about, to be honest with you. Slot admitted that. This was from, I believe, The Athletic. I think I might be wrong there. Look done physically, highlighting the midfield's inability to contest them. This collapse coincided with their inability to control late-game transitions and win second balls. That was, again, true in the Newcastle game. I look at the Wolves game as well. I look at maybe the Everton game. We just didn't compete physically. That's a big problem. McAllister's great and all, and he's got that kind of dogging him kind of fight, like he'll throw himself into challenges and he'll buzz about the pitch. Szoboszlai's quite physically strong and quite a presence. Gravenberch again, big guy in there, but he's lanky, and I just think these players, perhaps at times when you're coming up against an Everton midfield who are going to give a bit, you come up against a Wolves midfield who are going to give a bit, we perhaps go missing in that sense. Obviously, technically, we're a better side, but Wolves don't want us to play technically. We'll talk about Wolves actually in a minute because they allowed us to play their game. And that's a big problem. We can't be drawn into that again next season. This was the Newcastle game. We saw that midfield three, Guimaraes, Tonali, and Joe Linton. They got the better of us all game. Granted, we had, I think, Quanta was playing fullback, wasn't he? But it's no excuse. You Liverpool, you should not be getting dominated to this extent in a cup final, certainly. Newcastle won 57.3% of all duels, 51 out of 89, and 68% of aerial duels, 17 out of 25. And Slot said this, again, I believe, from The Athletic, if I'm wrong. Sorry, Athletic. Slot, the game had nothing to do with running. It only to do with duels in the air. If we play 10 games through the air against them, they win 9. How damning's that? In a cup final, to say that about your team is pretty extreme. He recognised straight away what the problem was, and the stats back it up entirely. He said that after the game. Dan Burns' opening goal came from winning 2 duels in the box. Well, them winning 2 duels in the box, I should say. Liverpool's defenders were physically overmatched, and certainly the midfield, I thought at the time. Obviously, McAllister marking Dan Burns. So I think this is all relevant for set pieces as well. It's probably more relevant with set pieces. Joe Linton, I mean, look at this. Dominated 9 duels won on the ground alone. Just on the ground. Can I forget the air? Liverpool's midfield managed only a combined 8 duels on the ground. Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, McAllister, a starting midfield. No Harvey Elliott, no Jones. They're the starting lads, them. A combined 8 in a cup final. Compared to them, probably ain't good enough. Liverpool have recorded dual success rates of 40. I want to talk about the Wolves game in particular. We could look at the Southampton game, 42%. I think they were the better side in midfield that day. We could talk about the Brighton game, 40%. I think that was the final game at season, or one of them, so we won't talk about that. But this Wolves game here, this was the 2-1. This was the 2-1, but it wasn't the first game. It was the second game. I believe perhaps in March. I want to say in March. Might be wrong there. 44.4%. They were the better team that day. They had more shots. I think they had 16 to our 8. Cunha scored. Salah scored. And someone else scored. Salah scored a penalty, I think. But that game, they were the better side for me, I've got to say. And they've got a midfield who can do that to you. They've always had that kind of midfield then, like Lamina and Neves back in the day. Not back in the day, a couple years back. But these players, they've always played to their strengths, Wolves, and that has been in midfield. I think you've had players like Moutinho, but you've had players like Vitinha go to Wolves and not work. Do you know what I mean? So that must be true, right? That they've got a very physical side. Andre for a reason. Andre's a player we were linked to for ages because he's a pit bull in midfield. He loves a duel. He loves to win him. I think we were going to sign him instead of Endo based on him winning tackles. Know what I mean? So if a team like Wolves comes up against us next season, like last season, I think there's a world in which we do struggle again, unless we get something right or change something. What can we do? What can we change? I think Wirtz is a key talking point here on the right there. Wirtz, that's too small for me. I put this in without even reading it. Wirtz, 1.25 possessions won in the final third in the Bundesliga, the highest in the Bundesliga. He's very good at turning over play in the final third, and he's very good on the press. So is Szoboszlai. I think it's simple as this: win the ball higher up the pitch, meaning you have to do less duels in the midfield, meaning you get beat less in the midfield. I look at the Newcastle game in the cup final. That whole game was played in midfield and won by them in midfield. If we'd have allowed them, if we'd have come out and pressed, same against PSG, we sat back against PSG. It's like, what are you thinking? Letting them play. You've got to play your own game. Play your own game. I know it was away, but press, be the aggressors, and then less turnovers in midfield. Turn them over on the back line. Force the mistakes. Diaz and Salah are so good at capitalising on defenders' mistakes from fullbacks. We didn't do it in either of the games. We were caught out. I think that's a key one. I think Wirtz could add to that. I mean, this guy's so good at final third. With Szoboszlai, I think it could be really, really challenging for a backline to press out at that. Start better simply. Maintain early dual intensity. Avoid passive starts. I think it's an obvious solution. We got caught so many times, not just Arne Slot, but under Klopp. Like, how many times we concede first in games? Like, oh my God, we're playing uphill again. Every single game we seem to concede first, like for about 2 months. It was getting to a point where, like, yeah, we might as well just start one of that. Just pass back to Alisson, stick it in goal. Let's get it over and done with. Let's just give him the start and let's move on. We did do quite well though, working uphill, but that's a big problem. Use Endo in tough physical matchups. We've seen this year Endo has been like 90% of games has been very good when he's come on or when he's played. Obviously, not played too many games, but he is that physical presence that perhaps at times Gravenberch, not that Gravenberch isn't, but he's a different profile Endo. Gravenberch would maybe prefer to cut out the passing lane, whereas Endo would rather go like man to man with the first bloke, you know what I mean? So different players for different games, I think is important. Even just to rotate, forget what game it is, just to give Gravenberch some games off. I think Bajcetic is coming in. Very excited. I think Slot's giving him a full pre-season. Hopefully he can kick on. We know he can. And Bajcetic has that like aggressiveness, I think, in his game. At times he's looked a bit, I think because he was still developing as a young lad. He was still, I mean, a bit like me, Bajcetic. But now he's put on some muscle, I'll tell you now, when you look at him. And I do think he's learned, hopefully, I think, learned from starting every game for Las Palmas in the top division. And he's going to come back a more physical attribute. Because I think not mentally. I think reading the game, I think he was there. I really think he was there. I look at the game against Everton. I look at Madrid. Like he was there in a lot of games. Bajcetic, maybe just that presence he didn't have, but hopefully he'll have that and just come in with Endo. Maybe they could rotate and give Gravenberch some minutes off. I've written down here Gravenberch rotate. Oh, that actually comes with my next point, by the way. Rotate skillfully in cup matches. Rest midfielders who are fatigued. Spoke about this. Wide support. Prioritise the fullbacks winning early battles to relieve the midfield. And it's very similar to what I spoke about with front line and Wirtz doing the same thing. Just take that weight off the midfield. How many times were maybe Robertson having a quiet game or Conor Bradley did it? Conor Bradley stepped up to midfield many times and gives some help in there. And he's another one who's very aggressive. And I think next year, when he's playing a lot more games, you'll see that from Conor Bradley, setting that intensity from the first minute. From the first minute, I think Trent has been guilty of starting slow in games. Conor Bradley's not going to allow it to happen. This man is going to set the tone, I think. And Frimpong as well. Frimpong's quite an aggressive player, you know what I mean? And I think his stats did a video on Frimpong. I don't remember him off the top of my head, but some of the stats are very in favour of him being an aggressive fullback. And Kirkus as well. He's got a better dual success rate than Robertson. He likes to win the ball high up the pitch. These two fullbacks are going to be exciting and allow us to win the ball back up high up the pitch, meaning there's less midfield duels to be made and lost. I think that's the key here. That's why it's almost like we're diverting the attention from the midfield to other places and winning the ball higher up the pitch with maybe McAllister and Gravenberch in that pivot like we've seen last year. Maybe even Gravenberch further back, deeper, and McAllister and Szoboszlai in that midfield too this year, giving more bodies in there. Maybe that's the reason. Let me know. There's a lot of talking points here. I think that is a big problem. Jules, whether it's aerial duels or ground duels, I apologise. My throat's been terrible today. Hay fever's been awful. So if I've been sounding crap and not been able to get my words out, it's because of that. We're trying to soldier through. There's a lot of problems. Well, there's not. There's one problem with Liverpool, and I think it's this, but that's how I'd solve it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you agree with anything I said? If so, leave a like. It really goes far. You know what I mean? It's my full-time job, this, so I appreciate every like. I really do. Cheers for watching. Thank you.